to the Construction Big Breakfast, where we give you a hearty serving of insider tips and business strategies to help fuel your day so you can thrive in the construction industry. Now, here's your host.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Construction Big Breakfast. Today we'll be diving into MIPIM, which happened last week, and joining me for today's podcast is our special guest, the boss, our CEO, our newly appointed director here at Invennt, Cameron Foley. Thanks for joining me, Cameron.
Thank you very much, man.
No point in introductions, you've been on the podcast plenty of times, and hopefully people will recognise you, but obviously we do have to ask you though, what did you have for breakfast?
I had a croissant and coffee, which is a layover from my time last week in France.
Oh, you have it. Is the French diet sticking, is it? Well, I went with a sausage bap and latte, but still Greg's. I'm going to mention Greg's in every podcast like I do at the moment. I'm hoping for sponsorship, I'll be honest. Anyway, MIPIM. So MIPIM finally happened for the first time in a couple of years, and it was your first MIPIM. So a sort of a new experience for you, slightly different experience certainly from the last few years. How did you find it? How did you get there? How long have you been waiting to get there?
Well, a series of good questions. I'll start at the start. So for those of you that aren't aware of MIPIM, it's a 4-day exhibition held in Cannes, normally every year. I say normally every year. But MIPIM 2022 this year was a good event. There was around about 17,000 people there this year, which is down on the usual 25,000-ish people. But obviously with what's going on in the world and has been going on in the world over the past couple of years, that was probably to be expected. But it's an exhibition, conference, and a huge networking opportunity for people flying in or coming into Cannes. Like I say, it's 4 days. This year's theme was driving urban change, and that's about making the places we live in, we work in, and we play in more sustainable and making it more prosperous for all. So that's the key theme this year. Opened up this year again by, it was Francois Hollande, who's the ex-president of France. So, and there was a number of key speakers throughout the 4-day event. I originally booked for March 2020, which is round about the time where the pandemic really took hold, particularly in the UK, and we were shut down. And subsequent to that, I think we tried to get there in June and September and various other times throughout the last couple of years where it was rescheduled, but we got there finally in March 2022. So
You say we, but it ended up just you, unfortunately, didn't it? Because
it did.
COVID allowed it to open up, COVID unfortunately kept Aidan behind.
It did. I mean, there was 3 of us were due to go. So me and my colleague Tim and Aidan. Tim had been in Canada for the previous 10 days, and going to MIPIM for another 4 was certainly a step too far. And Aidan had been on holiday in Scotland the previous week and managed to avoid COVID apparently for the last 2 years, and unfortunately caught it over the weekend. So we went from 3 to 1, and it was my first time as well, so I didn't really know what to expect.
And how did you find it? You know, what were your expectations going in, and did MIPIM tick the boxes? Was it not quite what you expected?
Well, I'd spoken to quite a few people, so despite being in the industry for quite a few years, I've never actually got to MIPIM. I know plenty of colleagues and friends that have been there over the last sort of 20 or 30 years, and they've always come back with different versions of events, so it was quite hard to piece together what it was actually, what my experience would be, and having never been there before, I just went there with an open mind. I took the networking part of it to be the element that would probably be most beneficial for me, beneficial for Invennt, try and generate some more leads and potentially some more business. So that was really the primary reason for us all going down there. Let's say there are a number of ways. Worth saying, there are a number of ways of getting down there. So you can go on the train from London via Paris. It's called the Can Express, which is quite a nice little name, and also some very keen and fit people, including a couple of our clients, cycle down there, and that's a very well organised event where road closures and food and help and maintenance is laid on for people that get down there.
I think around 90 people made it this year, did the arduous cycling journey.
Phenomenal, and my hat goes off to every single one of them. I took the slightly easier and lazier option of flying across into Marseille and then getting a car to Cannes, but
maybe next year, Cam.
Maybe next year, may.
So the MIPIM this year was urban transformation, was it? Was that the theme for the...
It was urban change, and it's really about making, as we said, about sustainability, putting sustainability at the top of the agenda, and making sure that people are thinking about, certainly post-pandemic, and as we know from some of the work, the excellent work that our clients are doing post-pandemic, what's the next generation going to be coming into in terms of how they're going to live, how they're going to work, how they're going to play, and creating space, creating environments for them to prosper and make sure that the next generation and the tail end of this generation that are coming through are making the best making better choices about what the future's going to look like. So that was the key theme for it.
And importantly, the global perspective to some extent, because this isn't, it's in the south of France, and a big chunk, I assume, are UK people out there, but there is definitely a global theme to MIPIM.
Absolutely. I mean, you're right. Whilst it's held in Cannes, people fly in from all over the world, and the good thing about it is the same theme is being pushed, the same agenda is being pushed across the globe. So if you're coming into MIPIM, you're greeted with all the discussions, all the chat was in and around sustainability. So that's got to be a good thing for the future. But certainly in terms of networking, it was I really enjoyed it. It was quite. I had a lot of fun doing it myself. You go to an event and you would probably bump into somebody that you knew, or you'd be talking to somebody, and then I quickly got into how it works. So you go to that event and then you'll talk to these people, and then they'll be going to some other event, and then I'll say, come across, we'll go to this one. So you go with that one, and then you'd eventually work your way around, and you'd fill your day. I mean, the first day, I thought I did quite well. I was out and around about 8 AM and into a breakfast meeting, and then you quickly work your way through the day, and it was the early hours of the morning when I got back. So without going back to my little apartment, so it was a really interesting day, and of course everybody you meet is there for the same thing. Some of them are there on their own as well, some of them with companies, and you can get in and amongst them and have a good chat, and because everybody's there looking at the same thing and basically trying to connect, trying to generate new business, that helps the conversation, and you're off onto the next event. So I found it, actually found it better than I'd hoped.
That's good.
For those reasons where it's great to connect with people and move on somewhere else.
I think the enthusiasm for Facetoface is quite strong at the moment. It's obviously something that people have missed, that sort of connection, that personal connection.
I think you're right. That was, you could feel it when you're walking into spaces and complete strangers come up to you and you're asking you how you are, how did you travel down, obviously talking
trying to find a cyclist.
But the whole thing was geared up, and the people that were going there were absolutely, face-to-face conversation was something that clearly they've been lacking. We've all been lacking for the last couple of years, and to go to an event like that, and for it to be staged, and for people were still quite respectful, though there was quite a bit of mask wearing, and the morning that we got there, the opening day was the first day that Cannes had lifted some quite tight restrictions, so there was a feeling there was a bit more freedom there, and but people were still respectful of social distancing and what have you, but they were still able to connect and meet face to face. So it had a good atmosphere. I mentioned at the beginning that the numbers were down, and I only knew that because at certain points people would say, oh, a couple of years ago, whilst we're spilling out onto the road over there, we're a bit quiet on this side, and 2 years ago we were really busy around here. So there was lots of talk about the numbers were slightly down, but for someone it was their first time, it still felt pretty busy, still pretty well attended. So,
and what the networking aside, what were some of the sort of key takeaways? Was there anything that you particularly saw in the sort of the pavilion, the talks, the events that you thought, oh, that's interesting?
Well, it was the pavilion itself. Again, that there was plenty of stands in the pavilion, and you had to buy a pass, which was quite expensive to get into the pavilion. And then once you're in there, there are several levels where you can walk through and walk around. But for me, most of the levels contained, it was mainly about investment, and there was country stands and city stands where they were trying to attract investment, so come and build in my town, or come and build in my region or my country. And there was quite a few banks and other professional services in that particular pavilion. And for me, who was going there to talk to like-minded contractors or specialists and trying to generate leads and get further business, for me it felt it wasn't the right place for us to be wandering around. The conversations weren't the right conversations to be having in there for us, particularly for Invennt. And we found that there was lots of events on the periphery and in the town that you got invited to and you moved on to, that were more beneficial in meeting people that could potentially be clients of ours in the future.
It's the positive for the industry globally, is that you do have those countries, cities, banks looking to invest in construction, that regardless of what's happened, the uncertainties around labour, material shortages, prices and everything like that, there is still a market there, and large parts of the world who are looking for investment.
Yeah, absolutely, and in particular construction processes, I had several conversations with professionals and insurance, banking, in and around modern methods of construction, and the fact that we should be pushing on with that, and what we're seeing is some pretty high profile failures over the last couple of years in that space, and so you've got to ask why and what can we do about it, how can we push that MMC agenda, and what is it that we need to do as an industry to help make that really big leap and go towards MMC as a primary source of construction. And so for me, there was quite a number of conversations in and around that that were really beneficial for me. And again, talking to insurance companies and banks and having their perspective was quite refreshing as well. It gives you a different perspective.
It's interesting because obviously the CCA conference over in Vancouver was a couple of weeks ago. Last week's episode of the podcast, if you've not seen it yet. Again, they were talking about insurance companies and being very, they were one of the headline sponsors, front and centre. They're obviously very visible in MIPIM as well. I know they are sort of in the periphery of UK events, but they don't seem to be as central to the conversation in the UK as they are in sort of Canada, obviously, and in the conversation to MIPIM maybe in other countries. And I wonder if there's a bit of a disconnect there that we need to try and overcome here in the UK.
Yeah, I was quite surprised at the number of conversations I had with those other professional services that were there. And you're right, we're not having those conversations, well, obvious conversations at that level with banks and insurance companies, and perhaps there's a space there, an opportunity for us all to come together and try and resolve some of these issues. And some of them are systemic, and some of them should be easy to resolve. But we're not having those conversations, and to get a different perspective and you understand why. For example, a big conversation was PI insurance, and why is it so expensive, and you get to hear the other side of the story. You can understand both sides of the argument. So why don't both sides of the argument come together and try and resolve it in a more sustainable way, given the change that's required and the theme of MIPIM. What is it that we can do together going forward would probably be a better conversation, rather than us going, oh well, we're paying too much, and no you're not, yes we are. So we need to develop that into something that there's a product or service, or certainly a more sustainable route to funding that.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure there are pockets of good conversations happening, but it's like you say, it's more about changing that and systemically changing it and having more of an industry sort of focus on those conversations and really changing the approach, understanding how sustainable solutions, outcome-driven solutions, do we change how we procure and everything like that to improve all of that. And there are great examples out there, the integrated project insurance model and things like that, obviously, that do better bridge that conversation, but it's about making it mainstream. That's what we really want to see happen, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with face-to-face conversations starting to happen again, is that something that we'll go back to and start having meetings and really trying to sort out some of the real key issues that we're all facing at the moment. Construction is changing, it needs to change, and will continue to change. But it is slightly concerning that when we do try and go for something that's a bit new, there's a lot of cynicism there, and we never want to be the first to try it. Maybe I can understand that viewpoint, but we certainly need to be the second to try it. And MMC is something that we've seen tried and fail a number of times. So that's an area where perhaps we could come together with industry, government, and specialists and professional services and try and solve that issue.
Yeah, and solve it in a way that solves it for everyone.
Yeah.
Which I think some of the solutions out there at the moment don't do well enough, maybe, or are too hard to understand for the larger part of the industry. I've not paid any attention to the time, but I'm going to assume that we've been roughly 20 minutes now. So what for you is the one thing you'll tell all of us out there to look at, think about, other than reminding me that I keep saying I'll cycle to MIPIM next year.
I'll just make a note of that.
What's the other thing that for you, your 4 days there, that you'll tell all the others, this is what you should look at?
For me, I thought it was the importance of networking again. Having been in front of a screen for 2 years and been able to get out and see people, speak to people, everybody's been in the same place, and there was that willingness to connect and reconnect again. And for me, that's the thing that I'll take away, is don't underestimate the power of that face-to-face conversation and where it can take you.
Yeah, I mean, construction is long been so relationship based for so much, and it always will be to an extent, no matter how digital or offsite we become. Relationships will always be a pivotal part of the industry. So thank you very much for that insightful conversation, Cam. If you were at MIPIM, please do let us know what your thoughts were in the comments. Was it your first time? Will you go again? What were your sort of key insights and learnings? It'd be great to hear from you. And if you strongly disagree with Cameron, let us know and we'll get you on, and maybe we can have a little debate. But as always, thank you very much for tuning in, for listening. Please do share, like, subscribe, and make sure that you tune in to our next episode. Thank you very much.
Want to learn more about how Invennt can help your business maximize its bottom line? Head on over to www.invennt.com and get in touch with our team today. Thanks for joining us this week on the Construction Big Breakfast. Make sure to visit our website, www.invennt.com, where you can subscribe to the Construction Big Breakfast on all platforms so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a positive rating. Or if you'd simply share it with a friend, that would help us out too. Be sure to tune in for our next episode.